I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
The message reached Meghan without warning, and within minutes, everything bearing the Sussex identity was thrown into jeopardy. Palace lawyers had not requested negotiations, offered a temporary compromise, or issued another carefully worded warning. They had secured a permanent legal freeze on the last crown-linked assets supporting her commercial brand. As she read the final paragraph, one devastating phrase made the decision unmistakable. The restrictions could never be reversed. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Meghan stared at the words irrevocable and without future renewal until their meaning became impossible to soften. The Sussex title, a royal rank granted by the monarch, could remain part of the couple's identity, but its commercial power had been cut away. The order froze Sussex-branded trademarks, crown-connected licensing rights, protected insignia, and royal archive imagery. It did not touch her personal wealth or unrelated companies. It struck only assets whose value depended on an official connection to the monarchy, making the punishment narrow and devastating. Harry heard the laptop close and entered before she could hide her anger. Meghan pushed the notice toward him, asking whether Charles had approved an attempt to erase everything they had built together. The Duke read the first page twice. A legal freeze, an order preventing rights from being sold, transferred, or commercially used, was serious enough. This one was permanent. Harry insisted his father would never target their private future, yet his voice weakened at the authorization page. The sealed attachment changed everything. Meghan broke its tab and discovered a documented legal account prepared months earlier, mapping appeals, replacement companies, transferred domains, and alternative brand names. Palace lawyers had studied every escape route before she knew a final decision was approaching. The king's legal household, the advisors protecting the sovereign's interests, appeared on the last page, confirming Charles had permitted the action. Then Harry noticed a second approval line bearing William's office code. Harry stopped speaking. Meghan watched his face tighten as he traced the reference number beneath that code. He had seen it inside a confidential palace file and had been warned never to mention what it contained. William had not merely supported the freeze. The prince appeared connected to its earliest planning. Charles had approved the final strike, but the future king may have built the path toward it. Meghan demanded the truth. Harry lowered the document and admitted that the reference led to a private family dispute the palace had buried months ago. Both understood the freeze had not begun in a courtroom. It had begun inside Harry's own family, and the hidden decision was still waiting to be exposed. For Meghan, the Sussex identity had become more than a title. It was the bridge between the life she abandoned and the future she intended to build. For Harry, however, that same name remained bound to childhood, duty, and the family he could neither fully escape nor completely reclaim. Now, seated across from one another in painful silence, husband and wife discovered that they were mourning two very different losses. Meghan had used the Sussex name to create continuity across charitable projects, media ventures, public appearances, and future commercial plans. It carried recognition that an ordinary business could spend decades trying to earn. Harry understood its deeper meaning. His ducal identity, the formal rank connecting him to the county of Sussex, was one of his last visible links to royal life. Freezing its commercial use did not merely damage their plans. It made him feel that his history was being separated from his future. Meghan broke the silence first. She asked why he had never warned her that the palace could preserve the title while permanently destroying its financial value. Harry answered that he knew such authority existed, but never believed Charles would use it against his own son. She challenged him immediately. If the king had approved the freeze, why was he still searching for excuses to protect his father? Harry rose sharply and moved toward the doorway. Meghan watched him stop with one hand resting against the frame, caught between leaving the argument and finally admitting what frightened him. The Duke confessed that defending Charles now felt like betraying his wife. Yet condemning the monarch meant surrendering the last hope that his family might someday welcome him back. Meghan heard the pain in his voice, but the confession offered no protection from what was coming. A recorded conference call delivered the next blow. Their advisors explained that several upcoming partnerships contained royal association clauses, contract terms allowing companies to withdraw if the couple's connection to the monarchy became restricted or disputed. The wording "Sussex" did not need to appear prominently. If a campaign depended upon royal prestige, the freeze could still trigger cancellation. Meghan asked how many agreements were exposed. The advisors hesitated before admitting that nearly every major launch required an immediate legal review. Another documented account exposed something worse. Meghan discovered that a trusted commercial intermediary had received a confidential palace warning weeks before the freeze became official. The intermediary had quietly withdrawn from one planned agreement, claiming scheduling problems while concealing the real reason. Harry realized the palace had been contacting people around them before either of them understood the danger. Harry suddenly remembered the reference number from the legal notice. Meghan pressed him to explain, but he looked away as a strained conversation returned to him, one that had occurred during a Windsor commemoration, a formal gathering held to honor a royal anniversary. One careless sentence had been overheard that afternoon. The silence between husband and wife deepened as Harry returned to the moment when those words changed the palace's patience into resolve. The freeze did not begin with a lawsuit, a press release, or an angry speech from the throne. It began during a private Windsor reception 6 months earlier, when a proposed Sussex campaign was mentioned in what should have been an ordinary conversation. One phrase, spoken quietly but heard by the wrong person, convinced the palace that the royal connection was no longer merely part of Meghan's identity. It had become the product itself. Meghan had entered the reception believing the boundaries were understood. The Windsor Remembrance Gathering, a private event honoring the service and legacy of deceased royals, placed family memories beside institutional duty. Palace officials had tolerated limited use of the Sussex title, as long as no commercial campaign suggested approval from the sovereign, the royal household, or the working family. The Crown Estate, which manages property and revenue for the monarchy under public rules, was especially protected from private endorsement. A licensing consultant approached Meghan during a quiet pause and described a campaign built around heritage, independence, and modern influence. She listened carefully before answering with the sentence that changed everything. "Sussex is the one royal asset they cannot take from us." The consultant nodded, unaware that Princess Anne had stopped within hearing distance. Meghan never saw the royal woman's expression harden, and the advisor never realized their conversation had just crossed an invisible line. Anne found Harry later in a side corridor and asked him directly whether his mother's memory and his grandmother's institution were being turned into commercial leverage. The Princess Royal, a title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, did not soften the question. Harry reacted with immediate anger. He insisted Meghan was creating independence, not selling the crown, and accused his aunt of judging his wife before understanding the campaign. Harry expected Anne to step back. She did not. The royal woman warned him that independence could not depend upon symbols belonging to the institution they had left. He replied that the Sussex identity belonged to his family as much as it belonged to the palace. Their voices remained low, but the bitterness between them was unmistakable. Anne dictated a formal account that evening, creating a documented record of Meghan's words and Harry's response. She sent it directly to Charles. The king read the account twice, removed his glasses, and asked whether any campaign material supported her concern. Charles did not order punishment. He requested an immediate legal review. a structured examination used to determine whether planned actions violate existing agreements or protected rights. Palace lawyers soon uncovered draft language promising a modern royal legacy, supported by proposed use of archived palace photographs. Those documents became the foundation for the permanent freeze. Meghan later discovered through the sealed legal attachment that Anne's account had started everything. Meghan demanded a private meeting. Anne refused to withdraw a single word. What began as an overheard sentence was about to become a face-to-face reckoning between two women unwilling to retreat. There were no cameras, no carefully staged smiles, and no advisors positioned between them. Meghan entered the private Windsor sitting room carrying the legal notice. Princess Anne was already waiting beside the empty fireplace. The Duchess expected a debate about trademarks. Instead, she encountered something far more personal. A royal woman who believed the monarchy's history had been turned into bargaining power, and who was prepared to defend that history without apology. Meghan had requested the meeting after discovering Anne's memorandum had triggered the legal review. The memorandum, a written record used to formally preserve information, contained the exact words overheard at the remembrance reception. She demanded that no aides or courtiers attend. Courtiers are trusted officials who work closely around the royal family. Meghan believed honest words became carefully managed statements whenever palace staff entered the room. Anne agreed to those conditions. She wanted the Duchess to understand that the freeze was not revenge for leaving royal duty or criticizing the family in public. It was about an institutional boundary, the line separating personal identity from the monarchy's official authority. The princess believed that line protected generations of history. Meghan believed it had been drawn to destroy her independence. Meghan placed the notice between them and asked whether stripping value from her family's name brought Anne satisfaction. The royal woman did not touch the document. She rejected the accusation and answered that protection was not punishment simply because the person being restricted felt wounded. Meghan replied that such words were easy to speak when nobody was freezing her future. Meghan's voice broke as she described the projects she had built for her children. She wanted them to inherit something stable, recognizable, and independent of palace approval. Anne softened for a moment, but she refused to retreat. The princess said those children deserved a family identity, not a commercial future dependent upon royal photographs, protected symbols, and the memory of relatives they barely knew. Meghan then asked the question she had carried across the Atlantic. Had Charles ordered the freeze from the beginning? Anne answered through the documented account she had submitted to the king's legal household. The monarch had approved the action only after new evidence showed that another Sussex licensing agreement, a contract allowing a company to profit from a protected name or image, was close to being signed. Charles had hesitated. Then the evidence removed his hesitation. Anne revealed how that evidence reached the palace. A confidential recorded statement came from someone inside Meghan's advisory circle, not from a palace spy. The source feared the agreement crossed a legal boundary and would provoke a larger scandal. Meghan turned toward the door, but Anne delivered one final truth. Charles approved the freeze. William demanded permanence. The prince had rejected every temporary compromise. The door closed softly behind Meghan, but William's hidden role opened a far more dangerous battle over who truly controlled the decision. William did not raise his voice when the file reached him. He turned each page, questioned every clause, and then paused above the line that would make the freeze permanent. This was not simply a brother judging another brother's choices. It was a future king deciding how much of the monarchy could follow a departing royal into private commerce, and whether family affection could survive when institutional survival demanded an unforgiving boundary. William understood why his approval mattered. His authority came from protecting future crown interests. The symbols, property, reputation, and public identity belonging to the monarchy rather than any individual royal. As the direct heir, he would eventually inherit responsibility for defending those interests. If Harry and Meghan could repeatedly rebuild the same commercial association under different names, every future restriction would become temporary, expensive, and almost meaningless. Palace lawyers delivered that warning through a documented legal briefing. They argued that a short freeze would invite new trademarks, replacement companies, and altered campaign language once the restriction expired. Only a permanent settlement could close every route back to the same royal connection. William challenged the lawyers on fairness, duration, and the impact upon his brother's children. Their answers remained cold but clear. Uncertainty would create endless disputes. William stepped away before the meeting and studied an old photograph of himself beside Harry. The brothers looked untouched by everything that would later divide them. He knew the Duke would not view the signature as institutional duty. Harry would see his brother choosing the crown over him once again, and no legal explanation could make that wound feel less personal. Charles entered quietly and asked whether another route remained. The king did not want a family disagreement turned into permanent law, yet he also knew repeated exceptions had weakened every previous boundary. William answered that compromise had become a doorway rather than a solution. Each exception created another argument, another campaign, and another test of royal patience. The prince then placed his pen down and approved the permanent terms without satisfaction. The final mechanism reached far beyond visible trademarks. It covered internet domains, archive designs, dormant licensing vehicles, companies preserved for possible future deals, and any new applications substantially similar to the prohibited branding. Palace lawyers also inserted a confidential clause blocking transfers to partners, companies, or heirs. Meghan could not revive the assets through another business. Harry could not pass their commercial value to his children. Forever now carried legal force. William signed the last page as Charles remained silent. Neither man celebrated. Yet before the meeting ended, a commercial partner in California invoked a termination clause, a contract term allowing withdrawal when agreed conditions change, and suspended an upcoming launch. William's pen barely made a sound, but its consequences had already reached Meghan and Harry thousands of miles away. The first cancellation arrived before breakfast. The second followed 11 minutes later. By midday, Meghan's advisors were no longer discussing how to challenge the freeze. They were calculating which projects could survive it. Every alert carried another reminder that royal association had been woven through the Sussex brand more deeply than anyone wished to admit. Now the threads were being pulled out at once, and the entire structure was beginning to tremble. Meghan watched commercial partners suspend a lifestyle collection, a documentary package, and an international speaking campaign. Each company feared that its promotional language violated the permanent restrictions. Royal association meant any wording, image, or symbol capable of making customers believe the palace supported a private product, because prestige had helped attract those partners. Removing the connection also threatened the commercial value that made the agreements worthwhile. Digital teams moved quickly. They removed protected crests, historic palace photographs, Sussex-linked slogans, and unreleased material suggesting royal endorsement. Every deletion weakened the story Meghan had planned to tell about heritage and independence. Success had once seemed close enough to touch. Now the language that gave her projects power had become the very evidence forcing them apart. Meghan stood at the conference table while an advisor read the growing cancellation list. The Duchess interrupted halfway through, seized the pages, and tore one sheet in half. Silence swallowed the room. She looked at the stunned advisors, steadied herself, and quietly apologized. Her anger had not disappeared. It had simply turned inward. Harry told her they could rebuild under their personal names. Meghan answered that he still carried his title whenever he entered a room, even when nobody spoke it aloud. The Duke remained a prince by birth, while she would be blamed for losing everything attached to the Sussex identity. Harry rejected that division, but his reassurance sounded painfully small against the cancellations arriving on her phone. Their lawyers delivered the worst discovery through a recorded emergency conference. An ordinary commercial appeal could not overturn the order, because the couple's earlier separation agreement contained a dormant enforcement clause, a hidden provision that became active if protected royal branding was misused. Meghan had signed the original agreement, believing the clause would never be triggered. Harry had believed the same. Now it had closed their easiest legal escape. Another documented account identified the person who had warned the palace, a senior branding strategist inside their advisory circle. The strategist believed Meghan was being pushed toward a licensing venture certain to provoke a crushing legal confrontation. Instead of confronting her directly, the advisor sent evidence to palace lawyers. The warning saved the brand from a larger scandal, but it also helped destroy it. Harry stopped waiting for professional solutions. He decided to call William without lawyers, aides or courtiers between them. The prince had made the restriction permanent. Only he could explain why. As Meghan watched her plans disappear from the screen, Harry stepped outside and made the call he had avoided for years. When William answered, neither brother spoke at first. There were no private secretaries, attorneys, or palace officials to absorb the anger. Harry stood alone, gripping the phone, while the future king waited in an empty room thousands of miles away. Their conversation was not really about logos or licensing contracts. It was about loyalty, resentment, and the unbearable question that had shadowed them for years. Where did family end and the crown begin? Harry called from a secluded terrace, while Meghan remained inside with advisors. William had dismissed his staff, removing the institutional buffer that normally protected royal conversations from uncontrolled emotion. A private secretary is the senior aide who manages a royal figure's official work and communication. Tonight, no such aide would soften the words, record the promises, or prevent two wounded brothers from speaking directly. Harry asked for one narrow exception: charitable initiatives and previously negotiated contracts, he argued, should retain limited Sussex identification. The Duke was not demanding unrestricted commercial freedom. He wanted enough space to prevent existing commitments from collapsing. William refused. The prince said personal use of the title would remain untouched, but no business or campaign could use it to imply royal endorsement. Harry accused his brother of turning their grandmother's legacy into a weapon. His anger sharpened when he invoked Elizabeth, insisting the late queen would never have wanted her family name used to destroy her grandson's future. William answered that the monarch had spent her life separating affection from responsibility. She loved deeply, he said, but she never allowed love to erase the boundaries protecting the crown. The monarchy as a continuing institution, separate from the individual wearing it. Harry's fury slowly gave way to exhaustion. He admitted the title had become proof that he was not completely cast out. Losing its commercial power wounded his sense of belonging more deeply than the financial damage itself. William remained silent long enough for the confession to settle. Then the future king revealed what the legal papers had concealed. William explained that Charles had rejected an earlier proposal, restricting Harry's personal use of the title. The disclosure came from a documented account of the king's legal meeting, which recorded the monarch's exact objection. Charles had approved the end of commercial exploitation, but protected his son's identity. The father Harry believed had erased him, had quietly preserved the last public sign of his place within the family. Harry finally accepted that the order would not be withdrawn. He returned inside and told Meghan plainly that his father had protected their family name, but the business built around it was over. She listened, then abandoned the planned appeal, and began preparing a public statement, surrendering the frozen assets. The brothers ended their call without reconciliation, yet Harry carried inside the truth Meghan needed to hear before the world learned what had happened. By sunrise in London, a private royal decision had become a global spectacle. Broadcasters interrupted their schedules, commentators argued over the meaning of the word forever, and crowds paused outside palace gates to read updates on their phones. Yet one newspaper front page reduced the entire conflict to 4 brutal words printed beneath a fractured Sussex emblem: "The Crown closes the door." For supporters and critics alike, the image became impossible to ignore. Buckingham Palace released a restrained statement confirming that protected royal assets and identifiers could not be used for private commercial endorsement. Royal identifiers are titles, emblems, images, and phrases capable of suggesting an official connection to the monarchy. The statement emphasized that Harry's personal family status remained intact. The Duke had lost commercial access to the Sussex identity, not his place as the king's son. Meghan responded within the hour through a documented public statement shared with broadcasters and commercial partners. She confirmed that she would not challenge the permanent freeze, and promised that future ventures would operate without crown-linked imagery or Sussex-based commercial positioning. The Duchess did not sound defeated, yet every carefully chosen sentence carried the weight of a future being rebuilt after its strongest foundation had disappeared. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace as the debate hardened. One woman raised a handwritten sign declaring, "A title is family, not a product." She told a television interviewer that the monarchy had protected a boundary any private company should respect. Nearby, another supporter defended Meghan, arguing that the former working royal had been punished for seeking independence. The second woman's voice shook as she asked why freedom seemed acceptable only when it carried no influence. Harry watched the coverage with the sound muted. A broadcaster suddenly displayed childhood footage of him beside William, laughing before duty, and resentment divided them. The Duke turned away. The prince appeared beside him again, moments later in a discussion of their private call, reopening a wound that no business ruling could explain. Media analysis traced the decision not to appeal to that recorded conversation between the brothers. The decisive turning point had occurred without lawyers, courtiers, or palace statements. Harry had accepted the boundary after learning Charles protected his personal title. The king had preserved his son's family identity while ending its commercial use. Meghan's statement attacked neither Charles nor Anne nor William. She did not accuse the monarch, the Princess Royal, or the future king of revenge. Instead, the final sentence declared that identity could not depend upon an institution that had withdrawn permission to use its symbols. The assets were surrendered. The public battle was over. Yet one verdict remained. Had the freeze destroyed Meghan's future, or forced her to claim one entirely her own? As the headlines faded into history, the real consequence emerged, not in what she had lost, but in what she could no longer pretend to possess. The Sussex brand did not end with an explosive courtroom defeat. It ended in a quiet room, where Meghan closed the final account connected to its royal identity and removed the emblem from the last unfinished campaign. Harry stood beside her as the confirmation appeared on the screen. Neither celebrated, and neither spoke of revenge. The institution had reclaimed its symbols. The couple, stripped of their commercial shield, now faced the future as themselves. The permanent freeze took full effect without another appeal. Crown-linked trademarks, protected names and symbols associated with the monarchy, were formally retired. Controlled photographs returned to palace authority. Dormant licensing rights were extinguished, and no successor company could reactivate them under altered branding. The decision mattered because it ended every remaining route back to the commercial power of Sussex. It also prevented the dispute from consuming another generation. Meghan retained far more than the headlines suggested. Her independent companies, personal work, creative projects, and freedom to build new ventures remained untouched. The commercial ecosystem dependent upon royal prestige had ended, but the woman behind it had not. For the first time, her next success would have to stand without palace imagery, inherited status, or the symbolic protection of the crown. Meghan removed a Sussex-branded folder from her desk and handed it to an advisor for archival storage. Archival storage means preserving material as a historical record, rather than keeping it available for active business use. Her hand lingered on the folder before she released it. The Duchess then looked toward Harry and said, "We build again, but under our own promise." The Duke nodded, although both understood how difficult that rebuilding would be. Harry finally admitted that the loss could not be blamed entirely on Meghan or the palace. He had allowed identity, grievance, family, and commerce to become dangerously entangled because he feared defining the boundary would mean accepting permanent separation. His wife had built around the title because it seemed stable. The institution had protected itself because that stability began looking like private ownership. Charles received documented confirmation that the assets had been surrendered without appeal. The king closed the file and refused to issue a victory statement. He had defended the monarchy, but the outcome still represented another painful distance from his son. William ordered the enforced legal papers sealed, meaning they would remain confidential rather than becoming tools of public humiliation. The prince had protected the crown, yet he refused to prolong Harry's defeat. His decision ended the legal battle with discipline, not revenge. The palace kept its symbols, Meghan accepted their loss, and the conflict reached its irreversible conclusion. The freeze ended her ability to turn royal association into commercial authority, but it did not erase her future. Harry learned that branding could never preserve belonging. The monarchy restored the line between public duty and private profit. No side truly won. Each finally accepted what belonged to the crown, and what had to stand alone. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.